My name is Andrew Daffy. I have my own new company called DAFFY DOT LONDON, which is a rebrand. I used to have a company called The House of Curves, which I used to do visual effects through, which is kind of my starting in this career. I was at Framestore for 10 years beforehand. I've always wanted to get into directing, and what I found through The House of Curves was that everyone wanted me to do the visual effects stuff, and I couldn't get to do the directing because, you know, the VFX was my go-to. So I've rebranded as DAFFY DOT LONDON so that I can specifically look at directing, and actually very specifically virtual reality, because it seems to be my calling, and yeah, I'm enjoying working in that world. I wasn't taken by virtual reality to begin with, but not having tried the headset on, I saw people on YouTube trying virtual reality on and falling off their seats, and I didn't understand. I didn't understand how people could be in one room and then not, and suddenly be, you know, forget where they were 3 seconds ago. And I wasn't taken by it. I went to Framestore and did a project with the commercial team there. I worked on a Stephen Hawking project where I had to turn him into a transformer. It was the Stephen Hawking bot. It was a beautiful project, but at the same time, they were pretty much the head of the game in terms of VR, and they showed me virtual reality, and I walked in there with this kind of attitude, you know, this kind of like, you know, prove it to me, and I was blown away. And I did what all directors, creatives, theatre directors, artists do when they put their VR headset on. They say, what's in it for me? They say, what can I do? And suddenly all your ideas change, and all the things that you've had in your mind for years suddenly find a new. It's a paradigm shift. I've been working on an underwater project for years. I think half my friends think it's never going to happen. When I put the headset on, that was it. My underwater project is now a VR project, and it's gaining traction. There's a few other projects I sadly can't talk about, but ultimately all my projects just lent themselves to virtual reality. I pitched my underwater project to Framestore. They really liked it, but they said, look, in the meantime, we're doing this Avengers thing. Why don't you come over to New York and work on this project with us as a starting point for you to get to understand the rules and to get to understand how VR really works. At that point, I'd kind of made my own, assumptions about how VR worked, and I actually, you know, with my big head, sort of thought I knew more than they did, just based on looking at some of the reactions that people get when they put the headset on. We can talk about that a little bit later, but in terms of the experience I bring to virtual reality, I think that any director can get to a point where you can get a decent render going and a decent visual effect because of the experience of every part of the team. But where I think a few directors are struggling in virtual reality is controlling the reality that people experience based on the fact that it's a 360 thing. And what I brought to Framestore, or one of my big contributions at Framestore, was pre-visualization. And I loved sitting with a director and figuring out how to make a shot work with cubes, very basic form, and how to tell story with pre-visualization. And that's VR all over. If you can get people to look in an experience at certain things in a VR space using cubes, then you're done. You know that, and that's how we manipulated the Avengers, and that's how I changed it. Is that I reintroduced previs in its very simplest form and told story through previs, and led the client through with previs, and then you're just adding, you know, the details. The details just. That's when you spit things off and you give it to your team, and everyone knows what's going on because the previs was God. So I think that's the big difference between me as a VR director and directors wanting to be VR directors. I think virtual reality is such a new art form that it hasn't been dealt with that well as yet. I think that the solution is just create an environment and allow people to just be amazed by the technology. And it's like, oh, and look, it's, I'm trying not to say a physical brand, but, you know, oh, look, it's Star Wars, oh, look, it's this, oh, look, it's that. And it doesn't matter what you put in the 3D space, because the first thing that people respond to is the effect. because you're showing this new art form, and I think that we have a social responsibility, and it sounds really deep, but I think that people who are making VR at the moment are in charge of people's first time in a VR in a VR space, and it's like sex. You want your first time to be good, and that's what I said about Avengers. I want people to put this on, and I want them to go off and take this thing off with wide eyes. And what I was noticing, I watched people use other experiences, and they put the headset on and they watch a project, and you see the director there, and they're watching them watch it, and they're amazed, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" But they're not necessarily saying the experience that they're watching is amazing. What's amazing is that their eyes are hijacked, and their ears are hijacked, and they're looking around, going, "Oh, so I can look anywhere I want to," but that gets confused with the actual physical content. And that's why we have a content problem, because people are getting used to this experience first and then the content second. And what I wanted to do with Avengers was make sure that people are going, I just don't even know I don't know how to deal with this, because the effect is amazing, and oh fuck, I'm in the Avengers Tower as well. That's cool too. And I realized there was an opportunity there, because it hadn't really, as far as I was concerned, the things I'd been shown, I was like, the effect is amazing, but what are you showing me? Like, you know, the thing that you're presenting is not great. The first thing we did was we followed some rules that I was given at the very beginning. Framestore laid out like a 10 commandments of VR. They're selling product to a very important client, and the last thing they need is people getting sick, because the client's not going to be happy. So we followed some rules. You know, cameras need to follow straight lines. They can't do too much swerving. You can't pull a camera backwards. You can't cut too much. You know, there's some things. So I used the single camera direction from one end of the Avengers Tower to the other as a basic story point. It's a pre-rendered story. Then during that story, I wanted to make sure that there were that you featured characters that took you from one place to the next, and that there was no way you were going to look anywhere else. You know, you see, you go through, pretty much you travel through the head of Iron Man, and then you're on your own journey, and you go down his arm as he does the repulsor beam thing. And then I used the robots, I used virtual reality space as kind of like a theatrical space. So I used things like robots to reveal the set, because there's no cuts. So you couldn't see the set because they were obscured by the robots. They shatter and they reveal the set. And then you look over to the right, because there's something red rising, and it's the Cloak of Thor. And then you realize it's Thor, and everyone's like, "Oh wow, look, it's Thor," and you follow him. And then he throws his hammer, Mjolnir, and then there's no way you're not going to look at this shiny chrome thing. It's CG porn, spinning this way like that, and then it follows, and you lead the eye, and you tell the story through leading the eye, and it's kind of persuasion, not force. It's like, I would hope that you'd want to watch this. And then suddenly Captain America gets revealed by these robots falling backwards and revealing him similar to, I think, the way he was in the first movie, where it's like we had a light fall down so that you get this theatrical underlighting. I wanted to really honor the films, and I wanted to honor the comics as well. So you see Captain America, who's got his shield, and he throws it. And again, there's no way you're not going to watch the shield, because you're done with the hammer now. That's going around the back of the set. You can watch everything in 360, so you can watch the entire trajectory of Thor, everything that happens with Mjolnir, but you want to watch certain things. And then you see the shield come round, and then from nowhere, through the smoke, Hulk comes down, and I wanted to make you feel like you were 6 again looking through the comics, and that feeling of size. So I got the camera low and got him high, and there's just... And the thing about well, not the problem with it, but Hulk steals the show. So you need a repeat viewing, because most people just see him like this, and their eyes, well, I don't know what their eyes are doing, but I imagine they're like this, going, "Oh my God." And I need you to kind of look back forward again to see the evil guy, and some people miss it. But it doesn't matter by that point, because they take the thing off and they're just like, you can see it in their face, they've had this experience. But at the same time, I want people to know that there's some stuff they're missing. By looking away from Thor, you know that he's not just going to go, you know he's not just going to stop. So what I wanted to do is show the opportunity for repeat viewing. I need to go and watch Thor all the way through. I need to see what Iron Man does all the way through. And it's like creating multiple stories in 360, and it was kind of all in my head. And I wrote down every trajectory and every storyline that you could watch. And then there's silly things like the Hulk lands on a pool table, the balls fly up in the air and you fly through them, but then if you watch the white ball, it goes into the pocket. There's just so many little silly things that we did that no one even knew. Like the compositor just sort of noticed it, and then, you know, in the final drinks, he was just like, I can't believe you did that. That was so, you know, it was obsessive. We got obsessive with it. And the more we did, and the more things like that we did, the more I think everyone was on board with how cool this could be, and it just pushed it, and we just, you know, we didn't sleep. It was Framestore New York. There were it was a lot of 3D, obviously, so there were modelers, riggers, texture artists. I would say between 20 and 30 people. I couldn't say, and I think we had between 6 and 8 weeks. We had a very happy client, comfortable client. In fact, the agency wrote to Framestore saying, halfway through, say, by the way, we're really enjoying this. We thought that this was the one we're going to have the heart attack over. And I think because we did the previs really quite accurately, all up, you know, up front, and we were really honest with the client, brutally. You know, when they had feedback, I sort of said, no, I don't think that's a good idea, and yes, I think this is great. And normally commercial clients are used to sort of being, you know, oh yeah, no, it's a really good idea, we'll really try and put that in, and we didn't have time for politeness or, you know, that kind of client handling thing. But because of that honesty, we got to this very raw communication, and it just meant that everything was super efficient, and everyone, and they were super happy with the final product.